वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। This is Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, founder and Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Tonight we are studying the final verse of chapter 12, text number 20. This chapter is entitled Devotional Service. By now you know the content of the chapter. So we'll just sing the verse once through quickly. Ye tu dharmyamritamidam yathoktam paryupasate shraddhanamat paramat bhaktaste ativa me priyaha. Yea, those who, to, but, dharma, of religion, amritam, nectar, idam, this, yatha, as, uktam, said, pariupasate, completely engage, shraddhanaha, with faith, matparamaha, taking me, the Supreme Lord, as everything, bhaktaha, devotees, they, ativa, very, very, me, to me, priyaha, dear. Translation: those who follow this imperishable path of devotional service and who completely engage themselves with faith, making me the supreme goal, are very, very dear to me. Let's repeat this, please. Those who follow this imperishable path of devotional service and who completely engage themselves with faith, making me the supreme goal, are very, very dear to me. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In this chapter, from verse 2 through the end, from Maya Veshya Mano Ye Mam, that is fixing the mind on me, through Yetu Dharmamritamidam, this religion of eternal engagement, the Supreme Lord has explained the processes of transcendental service for approaching Him. Such processes are very dear to the Lord, and He accepts the person engaged in them. The question of who is better, one who is engaged in the path of impersonal Brahman, or one who is engaged in the personal service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was raised by Arjuna, and the Lord replied to him so explicitly that there's no doubt that devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to the Personality of Godhead, is the best of all processes of spiritual realization. In other words, in this chapter, it is decided that through good association one develops attachment for pure devotional service and thereby accepts a bona fide spiritual master and from him begins to hear and chant and observe the regulative principles of devotional service with faith, attachment, and devotion, and thus becomes engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord. This path is recommended in this chapter. Therefore, there is no doubt that devotional service is the only absolute path for self-realization, for the attainment of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The impersonal conception of the Supreme Absolute Truth, as described in this chapter, is recommended only up to the time one surrenders himself for self-realization. In other words, as long as one does not have the chance to associate with a pure devotee, the impersonal conception may be beneficial. In the impersonal conception of the Absolute Truth, one works without fruitive result, meditates, and cultivates knowledge to understand spirit and matter. This is necessary as long as one is not in the association of a pure devotee. Fortunately, if one develops directly a desire to engage in Krishna consciousness in pure devotional service, he does not need to undergo step-by-step improvements in spiritual realization. Devotional service, as described in the middle 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, is more congenial. One need not bother about the materials to keep body and soul together, because by the grace of the Lord, everything is carried out automatically. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to the 12th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of devotional service. Vande Shri Guru Devam Tam Karuna Varunaliyam Yat Kripa Lavaleshena Pamaropyam Arayate Yetu Dharmyamritamidam Yat Hoktam Parupasate Shradadhanam At Parama Bhaktaste Ativa Me Priyaha. Those who follow this imperishable path of devotional service and who completely engage themselves with faith, making me the supreme goal, are very, very dear to me. At the end of chapter 11, Arjuna was wondering. Imagine how you feel if you were coming to the temple, let's say for the Bhagavad Gita class, and you saw the universal form. It would probably be a life-changing experience. So Arjuna was naturally very impressed at what he saw. In fact, we've been through that already, so you know. And therefore, at the end of chapter 11, something that Krishna said actually piqued Arjuna's interest, such that he brought up this question. Krishna said, actually I gave class on this verse last time I came. Mat karma krin mat paramo mat bhakta sangha varjitaha nirvaira sarva bhuteshu ya samam eti pandava. This is the last verse of chapter 11. My dear Arjuna, he who engages in my pure devotional service free from the contaminations of fruitive activities and mental speculation, he who works for me, who makes me the supreme goal of his life, and who is friendly to every living being, he certainly comes to me. So having seen this universal form, Arjuna was wondering, well, okay, this question therefore came up. Which are considered to be more perfect? Those who are always engaged in devotional service like this, or those who have this conception of the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifest? They're absorbed in that gyan, atma gyan, spiritual knowledge, impersonal knowledge, as described in the Upanishads and elsewhere. So it's interesting, the parallels here. The end of chapter 11 and the beginning of chapter 12 actually set they sort of precipitate the content of this chapter. In another 19 verses, Krishna is basically explaining that principle. Therefore, it's not surprising that here in the concluding verse, he mentions the same thing again. Mad parama, mad bhakta. These words were used, same words, at the end of chapter 11. And between text 2 and text 20, as Prabhupada points out in his purport here, Krishna is basically unpacking those concepts and telling us what exactly does it entail. Just because it's there, we'll mention as well. Mat karma krit, Krishna had mentioned in the end of chapter 11. doing my work. That's also mentioned here indirectly in text 10 of this chapter. It says here, mat karma paramo bhava, apyase pya samarthosi mat karma paramo bhava, mararthamapi karmani kurvan siddhim avapsyasi. Anyway, so these things are there, the parallels are there. And because Krishna had told Arjuna that the person who is engaged in this way excuse me, is the best. Therefore, Arjuna is thinking, well, what about these persons who are Atmagyanis, Gyanis and the Tattvadarshis, these kinds of people that Krishna has also mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. So according to Madhvacharya, who comments on this verse, he says that this concluding verse basically reiterates, summarizes, and repeats what was stated in texts number 6 through 8 of chapter 12. Those are important verses. There Krishna says very clearly, those who worship me, giving up all their activities unto me, and being devoted to me without deviation, engage in devotional service and always meditating upon me, having fixed their minds upon me, O son of Pritha, for them I'm the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. Just fix your mind upon me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and engage all your intelligence in me. Thus you will live in me always, without a doubt. So there's a couple of things that he said here as well. First of all, we have, according to Sridhar Swami, we have a variant reading here. Sometimes I have this pocket edition of Gita Press Bhagavad Gita that I carry around with me just for reference. So the text there is Yetu Dharmyamritamidam. And here in the new BBT version, I think it used to be Dharmyamritam, but now it's Dharmamritam. Similarly, Baladev Vidabhushan, commenting on this verse, he glosses the word as Dharmamritam. Dharma and Amritam. According to Ramanujacharya, that's Dharmam cha, Amritam cha. It means it's Dharma and it's Amrita. Sridhar Swami explains this. Dharma means quite a few things, but among them, Dharma means, well, what does Dharma mean? You tell me.
Constitutional position of something which cannot be separated from.
Okay, the intrinsic property of a thing, or its constitutional function. Anything else? Dharma.
Duty.
Duty? Anything else? Okay, that's the same as he gave. Anything else?
Krishna told in Bhagavad Gita.
Okay, that's a very general answer. You can't argue with that.
Can you repeat it? No, we can't hear.
Yeah. I'm asking, what does dharma mean? Somebody says it means the intrinsic property of the thing, the characteristic nature of the soul. Somebody else says it means duty. You said? Yeah, whatever the Lord orders is dharma also. All these things are true. Now, according to Vishnu Sahasranama, dharma actually means Vishnu. It's a name of Vishnu. It's not only an attribute of Vishnu, but it's also it's a proper noun. It's his name, Dharma. Dharma is of course one of the incarnations of the Lord. Those who have studied Srimad Bhagavatam know that. So Madhvacharya takes it that way. Dharma means Vishnu. Therefore, if you take this Dharmya reading here, Dharmya Amritam, his service means, anything that facilitates his service is then called Dharma. And according to Sridhar Swami, he says, Dharma eva amritam, amritatva sadhanatvat. That means, because it carries you into the realm of deathlessness, therefore it's also called deathless. Amrita means not dead, literally. But it means basically beyond death. Amrita also it means nectar, because in the realm beyond death they drink this wonderful nectar. So that's why these teachings are considered to be nectarian. It's described in many other places. Anyway, so this is another way to look at the word dharma, or dharmya. Either way you can take it, it still works. And what else does he say? When a person engages yathoktam, that means as has been described in this whole chapter, then because that process carries one into deathlessness, Sridhar Swami says, therefore he's using this word. It's like nectar. And he points out that some people see this dharmiya reading as well, others see the dharma reading. So, tadya upasate, that is to say, they who follow these teachings. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada's purport, or his translation, you can understand where he's getting his information from. Why does Prabhupada translate upasate here as follow this imperishable path? Because that's what Sridhar Swami has glossed it as. He says, upasate onatishtanti, means to follow. They situate themselves in these practices. And shraddham kuravanto, they act on their faith. Mat paramascha santa, their very existence is only for me. Mad bhaktas, those persons are my devotees, and ativa me priya, they are very, very dear to me. So, back in chapter, where was it? In chapter 11, text 55, when we first encountered this term madparama, there it was described by the acharyas in their commentaries that, I think it was Baladev says, that the person who is madparama is a person who doesn't even aspire to go to Swargaloka. That is to say, what to speak of going to Sainik farms. He doesn't want to go to Swargaloka. Everybody know where Sainik farm is? It's the most posh residential area in Delhi. Just an interesting fact also is that all the construction in that neighborhood is 100% illegal. But because it's all big people doing it, they get away with it and nobody says anything. Anyway, so what to speak of going to Sainik farms? We don't even want to go to Svarga Loka, the heavenly world, where you can drink this deathless nectar and enjoy in so many. You have so much facility in that world. But a real devotee doesn't even want to go there. That's what the meaning of Matparama is. He says, his supreme is me, Matparama. That's the idea. So this is what Krishna is saying. He's giving these adjectives. In this chapter, we've noticed already, Arjuna asks his question in text number 1. In text number 2, Krishna gives his succinct answer very clearly. The next few texts, he talks about the impersonalist because he has to accommodate everybody. That's called political correctness or diplomacy, as you want to see it. Then he talks about the real thing again, as Madhvacharya has pointed out for us through verses 6 through 8. Mayevanmana adhatsva, just fix your mind on me. This is the essential thing. Now, for the rest of us, he says, Atachittam samadhatum nashoknoshi maisthiram abhyasa yogena tato mam itsaptum dhananjaya. He's teaching the daughter-in-law by teaching the daughter, so to speak. And although he's addressing Arjuna here, he's actually talking to us. If you cannot fix your mind upon me without deviation, then follow the regulative principles, because in this way you'll develop a desire to attain me. If you can't do that, then just try to work for me, because by working for me you will come to the perfect stage. If you can't even do that, then just try to give up the results of your work and try to be self-situated. If you can't take to that, then engage yourself in the cultivation of knowledge. Better than that, though, is meditation, and better than that is renunciation of the fruits. Because by such renunciation, one can attain peace of mind. Here the word is used, chantir anantaram. Tyagat chantir anantaram. You get permanent peace commensurately to the level that you have become detached. This is an important point. Because, why? Because Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his commentary adds here that tu, the word tu is used in this verse. Ye tu, right? Ye tu dharmamritamidam yathoktam paryupasate. Those persons who worship as described. Yathoktam paryupasate. What is the rest of it? Shraddhatana matparama bhakta. These three words are used to describe them. They are the ones who are very, very dear to me. In each of these other verses, in the final verses of the chapter, Krishna is saying they're very dear to me. Okay? All the different types. But in this verse only, he says, they're very, very dear to me, because there's a special qualification given. They're Shraddhana, they're Matpadama, and they're Bhaktas. Matpadama we've already discussed. Now, what does Shraddhana mean? Anybody know? Shraddhana. Yeah, people who have faith. Madhvacharya again says, Shrad means astikya. This is according to dictionaries. And astikya means belief in God. You have faith that there's a divine being. We heard from Prabhupada this morning. He's always saying the same thing. Mayadhyakshena prakriti suyate sacharataram. He's quoting Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, this material nature is not working automatically. It's working under my direction. Mera adhyakshama, you can say. It's working, everything that happens to us is passed through his approval system. This is the point. Not a blade of grass is waving in the wind without the sanction of the Supreme Person, the Shruti Mantra tells us. So a person has to have that faith. And Shraddhana means that he takes his faith and he's investing it in God. Therefore, that person becomes Shraddhana. The person who has this Shraddha and invests it in this spiritual life, in the Supreme Lord especially, that person is called Shraddhana. So the person, the devotees who are the most dear to Krishna, they have to be the most faithful. There are 3 classes of devotees, and they're all divided according to the strength of their faith. They're not divided according to their socioeconomic status. They're not divided according to their political power. They're not divided according to how much personal beauty or knowledge or good birth or any of these other opulences mentioned by Kunti, as we heard this morning. They're not divided on this basis. They're divided only on the basis of their faith. You have pakka faith, and if you engage in that faith, shraddham kuravanto, as Sridhar Swami told us, you're actually acting on that faith. Then you come to this stage where you're Matpadama Bhakta. And Krishna says, this person is very, very dear to me. Now, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has also pointed out that the 2 is meant to separate them from the previous examples, because we've heard other kinds of devotees, right? The kinds of devotees who cannot fix their mind. What are they advised to do? Anybody remember? You follow the regulative principles, and persons who can't do that, then you just try to do something for Krishna. If you can't do that, you try to do something for anybody else. Something selfless, right? Now it's interesting here, I was reading the purport, and Prabhupada mentions each of these processes, but how does he mention it? Let's listen to this. He says, in the impersonal conception of the absolute truth, one works without fruitive result, meditates, and cultivates knowledge to understand spirit and matter. This is necessary as long as one is not in the association of a pure devotee. That's very powerful, isn't it? Why? Because Prabhupada is mentioning here exactly those things that Krishna has mentioned as well, which implicitly, we should infer from this that to the extent that we fall into that category, we have some contamination with impersonalism or fruitive activity. So these are not the devotees that Krishna is talking about. He's making a contrast here. Yetu dharmamritam idam yatoktam paryupasate. Te, he says, ativa me priyaha. They are the most beloved to me of all the devotees. Many different kinds of devotees. Now Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur goes on. He says, somebody who has some of these qualities, he's certainly dear to Krishna. And the person who has all these qualities, he's the most dear to Krishna. Now, what are these qualities? He says, bhaktyutta shantyutta dharmaha na prakrita gunaha. This refers back to text number 12, when we were mentioning a minute ago. Shantiranantaram. We get permanent peace when we detach ourselves, when we become a little bit detached. Then we get permanent peace. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that these qualities come as a result of bhakti, and that bhakti comes when we're in this state of permanent peace. So you have to be liberated in order to perform really pure devotional service. Even though pure devotional service is also the best means of liberation. But it should be understood that a person who is really the Matpadama devotee here, he's liberated. This is confirmed later on when we get to chapter 18. Anybody know the verse I'm thinking of? Brahmabhuta prasannatma samasarveshu bhuteshu, same thing as we heard in 1155, isn't it? And mad bhaktim labhate. At that state you get real bhakti. Before that we're practicing what kind of bhakti? Those who have heard my lectures know what I like to call it. Probate bhakti. Bhakti with training wheels. Bhakti on probation, you can say. We're not real devotees yet because we fall into these categories that Krishna has mentioned already. We're not Matpadama. We're not Shradhana, exactly. Not, at least not, Sthayi Rupma. So, this is also an important thing. But, this is a very important point he makes. Sadhaka api, tebhya siddhebhyopi, shrestha. Yeah. No, it's Baladev, I'm sorry. Baladev Vidyabhushan says this, that because they're trying to attain these qualifications, therefore they're also considered to be devotees. One time Srila Prabhupada said, pure devotee means he has no motive. You don't have to be advanced, but if you don't have any agenda or any personal motive to fulfill in performing devotional service, but you're actually striving your best to become a Matpadama Bhakta, then Prabhupada said that is also considered to be a pure devotee, especially if you're working under the sponsorship of another pure devotee, which is also something that Prabhupada has emphasized here in his purport. So that sponsorship is all important because it not only does it inspire us and enlighten us and guide us and elevate us out of these other three options that Krishna has mentioned here, and impels us into the Matpadama realm and into the Shradhatana realm. But that's actually the eternal constitutional position of the soul. We become, as Kulashekar Maharaj said, Tvad Britya Britya Paricharaka Britya Brityasya Britya. 7 times removed, I'm the servant of the Lord, Lokanath, he says. Very nice verse. So then Baladev Vidyabhushan ends his comments with a very beautiful verse. He says, Vasha Swaika Josham Krishnaha Swabhaktyeka Josham Tusaha Prityaivati Vashaha Shriman Iti Dvadashi Nirnayaha. The conclusion of this 12th chapter is this, that Krishna is actually under the control of somebody who is enthusiastic only for him. And also for the person who is enthusiastic about the process of becoming so qualified. This is echoing what we've already heard. You may not be a completely perfect and pure devotee yet, but as long as that's your only purpose, then you're also considered to be. You have the same, you're included automatically together with them. So that's the idea here. Vasha Swaika Jasham Krishna Swabhaktyeka Josham Tusaha. Why? Prityaivati Vasha Shriman, the Lord of Shri. Shriman, what does Shriman mean? The possessor of Shri. In the Dharma Shastra, the husband is considered to be, the wife, that is to say, is considered to be the property of the husband. Therefore, Shripati, Shriman, the possessor of Shri, means the Shripati, the Lord. But it's certainly intentional, because in our line, we definitely emphasize the Lord's Shri, his internal potency. Shri, or in her ultimate form, the ultimate form of Shri is called Jaya Shri, because she conquers even Lakshmi. Who is Jaya Shri? As in Jaya Shri Krishna, it means Srimati Radharani. This is many, many times described by our acharyas. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in his Sarangarangada commentary on Krishna Karnamritam, first verse, which mentions Jaya Shri. He says that when we hear the name Shri Krishna, that is to be understood that we're talking Radha Krishna. And especially if we hear Jaya Shri Krishna, that especially is Jaya Shri, meaning that form of Shri who can conquer even Shri, meaning Srimati Radharani. So this Shriman, he is under the control of what thing? Prityai. Only for love. He becomes under control. This is the idea. There are many, many verses about this point. But since Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has already mentioned here, na prakrita gunaha, the qualities that are developed by the pure devotees, some of them we've just been mentioning in the last 4 or 5 verses, beginning with advaishta. If you go back to text 13, advaishta sarva bhutanam ityadi, all the way up until today's verse, these are the qualities that the Madhparama devotees exhibit. Very, very important qualities, and they're very difficult to attain. If you're reading very carefully, you'll also see that even within this list itself, there is some reduplication. He's repeating the same things again and again and again. And certainly throughout the Bhagavad Gita, just try this. Go home and check your folio. Do a web search, say, for tatamana pamaneyoho, or some such phrase. You'll find so many examples. Throughout Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is repeating the same thing again and again and again. And even from text 13 through text 19, he's repeating the same things again and again. Sama sukha dukkha, person who is the same in happiness and distress. Right? Let's just, in case you don't believe me, I'll just give you some. In text 13, sama dukkha sukha kshami. Okay, that's the first one. Then we also get in text number 15, harsha marsha bhayodvegaihi, etc. It means essentially the same thing. And then we go on again, and we see it again here. Shitoshna sukha dukkeshu, that's in text 19, text 18, right? Nahrishyati nadveshti, nashochiti nakangshati. These are the ideas. A person who is liberated, and a person who is especially liberated through practicing devotional service, yatoktam, as we've been discussing, that person develops these qualities. And even if we only want to develop these qualities and don't necessarily have them yet, then we're still considered ativa me priya, Krishna says. Isn't that encouraging? Because I know that I look at this list and just scratch my head and wonder, when is it ever going to happen? But just to have that sense of longing is an important qualification. It's called lalasamai bhakti, to long for some perfectional state. And Krishna says that if you have that qualification, then you're ativa me priya, you're the most dear to me. Wonderful, wonderful thing. So, now another thing here embedded within the idea of Shriman. Well, before we go on to that, I wanted to read a little excerpt from Rupa Goswami's Padyavali, because it deals with this idea that we hear from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur about the qualities of a devotee are not material qualifications. He says, Vyatyasya charanam dhruvasya chavayo vidya gajendrasya ka kubjaya kimunam rupamadhikam kim tat sudam nodhanam vangsha ko virurasya yadavapate rugrasya kim paurusham bhaktya tushyati kevalam nachagunehi bhakti priyo madhava. Very wonderful verse. He says, where was the, he's talking about all the devotees. Well, first of all, he says, Lord Madhava, the Lord of Shri, Shriman, Madhava. Ma means Lakshmi, Dhava means husband. So, Lord Madhava, Krishna, or Narayan, the Lord of Shri, he's pleased only with bhakti, bhakti priya. He's not necessarily pleased just by one's material qualifications. And then he goes through the list of examples. He said, where was King Ugrasena's martial valor? King Ugrasena. What happened to King Ugrasena? He lost his kingdom. He was defeated. See? Vamshako Vidurasya. Where was Vidura's pedigree? What was Vidura's pedigree? He was Sutta. And Kim tat Sudamno dhanam. Where was Sudama's wealth? This is, of course, before he met Dwarkadish, his friend. He had nothing. Kubjaya kim unama rupam adhikam. Did she have any beauty to speak of? Kubja? No, nothing. And Dhruvasya chavayo. What was Dhruva? Did he have any maturity? Dhruva? How old was he? 5. Vidya Gajendrasya ka. Did Gajendra have any particular knowledge? If you read his prayers, you might wonder. They're very deep. But after all, he was an elephant. And Vyatyasya charanam, this hunter, what character does a hunter have? He's got no character. Still, all these personalities who are mentioned in Mahabharata, Ramayana, Srimad Bhagavatam, they all surrender to Krishna, because Krishna is only pleased by bhakti, not by any material qualification. We can take this a step further because it's here in front of me. There's a nice verse also quoted by Rup Goswami in Padyavali. A little bit related. He's dealing with the difference between auspicious and inauspicious activities. He says, Anuchitam uchitam va karma ko yam vibhago bhagavati paramastam bhakti yogo dharhyan kiriti vishamyahindraha sandra piyushamindur dvayam api samahesho nirvishesham vibharti. What does this mean? It means that for a devotee who is engaged in pure devotional service, there's no such thing as uchitam and anuchitam. That is to say, things that are appropriate and things are inappropriate. Everything can be used in Krishna's service, and everything can be rejected for Krishna's service. What is the pivot? The order of the spiritual master. If the spiritual master orders you to accept something that's ordinarily superfluous, such as varnashram dharma, since we're talking about dharmamritam, then you accept that thing as being fully transcendental. On what logic? On the basis of chapter 4, text 24 of Bhagavad Gita, which says, Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavir, Brahmagnau, Brahmanahutam, Brahmaiva tena gantavyam, Brahma karma samadhina. What does it mean? The butter that you offer, the ingredients, the grains that you throw into the fire, the mantras, the priest, all of it is considered equally transcendental, because it's all being used in devotional service for a pure devotee. You see? So similarly, he says, Anuchitam uchitam va karma ko yam vibhago. Well, what is the distinction? We don't have any distinction between sinful and pious activities. Bhagavati paramastam bhakti yogo dridhyan. If we are in fact, this is in fact, working on behalf of the Supreme Lord, according to his explicit instruction. Kiriti vishamahindra sandra piyushamindur. That is to say that the snake is constantly spewing out venom, and the moon is constantly emanating nectar. And yet, dvayamapi samahesho nirvishesham vibharti. Lord Mahesh, he doesn't make any distinction, does he? He embraces both of them. He's covered with snakes, and he's also drinking poison. He accepts them because his spirit is this, bhakti yoga dridhyan, to be fixed in pure devotional service. This is Padyavali, texts number 8 and 9. The first verse is Dakshinatya, some southern poet, and the second verse is Vishnu Puri. Vishnu Puri. He would know, he was a resident of Kashi. Vishwanath Kashi is there. So these are just a few things we can think about here. We are very fortunate to have a wonderful purport by Srila Prabhupada. Hopefully a few comments on what the acharyas have said before him illumine Srila Prabhupada's choice of what to write in his purport. We can see the predecessor acharyas represented here. Very interesting ideas. And I'll stop here. If anybody has any questions, we can discuss. Shubha Krishna. Microphone out he had.
I have a question that Krishna says that you should practice bhakti yoga to get the desire to attend me, and otherwise we can work for him. So suppose a devotee is engaged in temple seva. So is he working for Krishna? That means the next shloka, or is he engaged in bhakti yoga?
Well, first of all, abhyasa yoga, he uses the word. If you're not able to fix your mind firmly on me, then practice, because then you'll develop a desire. If you're unable to practice, then mat karma paramo bhava. I've already mentioned mat karma in relation to text number 55 of chapter 11, right? Remember what I said? It's interesting because in the commentaries on this verse and the commentaries on 1155, the same activities are enumerated. That is to say, you're planting some garden for Krishna, you're watering tulsi plant, you're doing this, and all temple services like you're mentioning. So your question, why don't you repeat simply? So,
doing these activities which are directly connected to Krishna, my understanding is that they're transcendental part of bhakti yoga.
mm-hmm.
But some devotee told me, this is external, and so I was kind of a little bit discouraged on that point, that how this is external, because like suppose if I'm making a hall which you will use for Krishna Katha, that is Brahma Havir, that's my understanding.
Yes.
That is why my interest is there.
That's right.
So how that is external to bhakti?
Well, this is a very good point, and it relates to this verse that we've talked about, anuchitam uchitam va, that something, the same thing, you may regard it as sinful, you may regard it as pious, but when it's devotional, then it's in a transcendental category. Now what that means, if you think about it, between the lines, it means that devotional service, if you're not fixing your mind on Krishna and are not working with faith and are not interested in advancing spiritually and have no knowledge nor care about it, then the same thing can be material for you if Krishna wants. Now, the whole thing here is the X factor is Krishna. Because let's put it like this. If you've been a devotee practicing seriously for some time, but due to some offense, let's say, you lose your taste and lose your interest and become, in effect, insincere. At some point, Krishna may just decide that, okay, well, he's just on the mundane platform and that's his interest, so I'm going to let him go there. He can do that. On the other hand, if you have no knowledge of Krishna at all, have never been exposed to Krishna consciousness in any way, then you just happen to say, you may even be born in a Muslim family, and you say, Haram! But Ramachandra hears this, he's chanting my name, Haram! You see? And you get the punya. So it depends on Krishna's desire. You cannot predict who's in what category. A temple pujari who is a separatist, as described by Kapila in Bhagavatam, Tritiya Skandha, that person may be engaging completely on the material platform. We find all the time. If you go to Jagannath Puri, for example, they're very aggressive there. They're really just, it's only money. I mean, let me put it this way. I visited a friend of mine recently in South India, Tiruchendur. Tiruchendur has one of the biggest Skanda temples in India. And I was staying in the house of one of the priests of the temple. So he was telling me that there's only 3 things that are happening here in Tiruchendur. He says, money, just money, only money. And who would know better? You see, so if a person is on that platform, then that worship can be prakrita bhakti. In fact, it's called prakrita bhakti. And the gunas that a person exhibits are also prakrita guna. But when a person surrenders to Krishna as yatoktam, the word is used here, as has been described here, particularly in text number 2, and in this verse also, then Krishna will take even the faulty service that we render, and he will elevate it. That's his nature. Or the blessings of the spiritual master, more likely, will do that, because we always have to work under the sponsor. We have to have a sponsor for our soul and work under his direction. And most likely his kindness will carry the day for us, because who are we? You see? So in that case, even we're dreaming about bricks and concrete and mortar and haggling with workers and trying to get people moving and all these difficult things. I mean, think about, I told you to turn it off. Think about what it took in the beginning to actually get this temple built. If you read these books, nice new books that Daiva Shakti Mataji has published, wonderful story. Amazing sacrifice had to go on to get this thing happening. That was all bhakti. The things that Guru Kripa did in Japan to raise the money necessary to finance this temple, not easy stuff and not very pleasing also activities, but it was bhakti because the sincerity was there. I want to make Prabhupada smile. You see? So really the key here, as Prabhupada indicates or hints in his purport, when we meet a pure devotee and work under his direction, then it all happens automatically. Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasado. Yasya prasadam nagati kutopi. You see? Is that okay? So don't have any doubt about that. Even your person, what does he say? A person may look to be a pound, shilling, pence man, Rupa Goswami says, but if his only purpose is actually to please Krishna. Purpose. It hinges around your purpose. If you only want to please Krishna, then you're considered Jivan Mukta Uchyate.
Also, in the text, Lord Krishna says, engage all your intelligence in me. And the function of intelligence is planning. So if you're planning to preach, just intelligence only means the reading of Shastra, which we do also. Yeah. Or it also means planning for Krishna, or anything we have to do for Krishna.
Mad buddhayas maratmanas nishtas mad parayana ityadi. And Krishna says, everything, whatever you have, yad koroshi ityadi. Whatever it is, you give it to me. This is the idea. Mat parama. Mat parama means that, there are two kinds of devotees. One is the person for whom Krishna is the main thing in his life or her life. And the other person is the one for whom Krishna is the only thing in his or her life. That is the category of the gopis. And that is the Mat parama bhakta, that is ativa me priya. Okay? Clear? Anything else?
Many times we hear about tolerating heat and cold, but here when the heat is there, immediately we switch off. That we have to really practice this. How is it?
That's why it's like this. I asked Gopi Pranadhana when I first moved to Govardhan, why is it necessary that Yogamaya arranges that the first thing I see when I come out of the house in the morning is a black goo in the nulli just outside the door, and half crusty pigs lying in that, and yelping puppies and dirty kids, and it smells horrible, and smoke everywhere, flies, mosquitoes. Why is it necessary? And the extreme heat, extreme cold. Why is it necessary in Vrindavan Dham? He told me this is all a function of Yogamaya. And it's necessary in order to keep the riffraff out. You know what riffraff means? Means the, I don't know how to, Hindi mein riffraff ko kaise bolte hai? I don't know. Yeah, basically the rascals. Badmash. Yeah, you see. So, if Vrindavan was always comfortable, then how in the world would we be able to make this advancement to this level? One time I was in a very traumatizing circumstance, and I took shelter of my elder godbrother, Keshava Bharati Maharaj. And he gave me very sound advice. He said, what does it mean? We say, Sharanam Prapadye, I take shelter. What does it mean to take shelter? Shelter. What is the meaning of shelter unless there's some onslaught against which you need protection? Right? What is the meaning or use of an umbrella unless it's raining hard outside? Correct? Now, how are we going to learn anything about taking shelter unless we're actually under attack? Therefore, it makes perfect sense that the place where it is most difficult to stay is the place where the maximum bhakti is available. That is Vrindavan Dham. Jaya Shri. Okay? Is that clear?
We have to, without putting on AC, we should try to tolerate it, or...
Well, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. And in my experience, when you get older, it gets harder and harder to do any tricks, even the old tricks. So, this is why we have bona fide spiritual masters, because one has to work these details out in consultation with somebody who's actually more advanced. In some cases a person can be pushed, and in other cases a person cannot be pushed. If you try to push yourself more than you can do, sometimes you can hurt yourself. That's another thing. And, on the other hand, if you don't push yourself at all, then how will you ever advance? So that's why we have bona fide spiritual masters, because they push. They push. So he's the external manifestation of the Supersoul. Krishna, he speaks very softly and he doesn't often repeat himself. But spiritual master will send you a very clear message. You will know. This is why he's more merciful, considered more merciful form. Is that okay? So, abhyasa, if we cannot tolerate all this stuff just now, then we have to work on it. And under his direction, this is the idea. Somebody else was here raising, yeah. Mike Daniel.
Krishna Prabhuji, in this verse you read in the impersonal conception of absolute truth, one verse without fruitive results. In this, the sentence is, this is necessary as long as one is not in the association of pure devotee.
That's why I emphasize that.
If suppose, what my understanding, maybe it is wrong, when I go out of temple, out of Vrindavan, out of devotees association, can I be an impersonal?
Well, you always can be, but it's not necessarily it's not like that. No, I don't think so. Maybe I'm not understanding the question. You want to restate your question?
Because whenever I am in the association of the devotees, or in the temple, or in Vrindavan, but when I travel outside, then I have no chance to association with the devotees. So I am the impersonal. That means I am also.
Well, here's the thing. We're working in something like an artificial environment here in Vrindavan. Of course, this is the real environment. Everything else is actually artificial. But because we identify still with that outside the material world, whenever we go into that material world, we're going to feel more challenged than when we were living in Vrindavan. When you live in Vrindavan, it's automatic to perform devotional service. Everything is easy. It's no problem. But it becomes very difficult when we leave Vrindavan. So that's, in that sense, you're going to find very little other than karma and gyan out there. And so the tendency to become impersonal, or the tendency to become fruitive, it's very strong, and we have to be on guard. That's the point. Just like, here in Vrindavan, we have in deity worship, when we prepare the water to bathe the deity, we have the mantra, Gange cha yamune chaiva ityadi. So we are asking the holy rivers to come into the water. But here in Vrindavan, it's already Yamuna water, so there's no need to do that. But when you go outside of Vrindavan, there's actual need to do that, because it's no longer a Yamuna jal. You see my point? This is the thing. So yeah, it's more difficult. That's the point. In fact, in this same Padyavali, there's a beautiful verse, and I have to go in a minute, so I'll end here, that Rup Goswami writes, or he's quoting somebody. It says that if a person very ardently worships Krishna with full devotion and beseeches the Lord for his mercy, for some particular benediction, Krishna doesn't always give it to him. He doesn't have to. But all you have to do is be in Vrindavan. You have merely to exist in Vrindavan. Just be here. And Braja Devi will automatically give you bhakti. Even somewhere else you're worshipping Krishna very ardently, and Krishna may or may not give you bhakti. But here, even if you don't worship Krishna, Braja Devi will give it to you. That is the wonder of this place. That's why we worship this dust. Is that okay? Parvati Mata had a question.
There's also the ardent worship of Krishna, but maintaining our own agendas, so that we may be planning our service very sincerely,
Yeah.
but not discarding
With the utmost motivation also.
yes.
Yeah, no, enthusiasm is not a problem in that case. Yeah, His Holiness Ramapad Swami described this quite well in one seminar he gave on mixed bhakti in Seattle. He said that if a devotee maintains his own personal program and in conjunction with Krishna consciousness, the nature of bhakti is that Bhakti Devi removes anarthas. And so if we're clinging to that anartha of trying to take advantage of Krishna or his process, then as tightly as we cling to that anartha, when Bhakti Devi removes the anartha, we will be removed along with it. Therefore I said, if someone becomes insincere, then Krishna may decide, okay, it's time for you to go. And you're out of here. And that happens. It really does happen. So we have to be on guard, careful. Therefore we say, Bandhomui savadhanamate. We have to bow down very carefully in this line. And especially watch out for offenses. Is that okay? If there's nothing else, I'll end here. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you very much.